Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today, I was able to watch the film of Steelers versus Dolphins from Monday Night Football last night, and today I have my film takeaways from that film study on offense and defense. And stick around for a defensive takeaway that really surprised me when I watched the film earlier today. Now, before we get into the film takeaways today, if you guys want actual film examples, I post those on my X account at Jack_Sperry. If you guys want to follow me on X, I put out my film examples every single week on X because we can't put them up here on YouTube or else we'll get demonetized. We're still going to be talking about the template and all this different stuff and talking about all the different points and the takeaways that I'm taking from the film. But if you want the actual film examples along with my thoughts on those plays, you guys can follow me at Jack_Sperry and check out my film study for this week. But we'll start here on the offensive side of the ball, and we'll start with the quarterback that had an 85% completion percentage yesterday, the second highest of his entire 21-year NFL career, and that is Aaron Rodgers, who got hot last night in the cold. Just an insane performance for him in this football game, guys, in terms of the efficiency and the accuracy. And it wasn't necessarily the craziest game for Rodgers in terms of throwing the ball down the field with explosive shots down the field like we saw in Baltimore a couple of weeks ago. But what we saw from Aaron Rodgers in this football game was somebody that was willing to take what the defense was giving him. He did fire some shots down the field into some tight windows like that touchdown to DK Metcalf. He protected the football abundantly well. 0 interceptions in this game to 2 touchdowns. And once again, increasing that lead that he has among Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields in terms of the most passing touchdowns for any Steelers quarterback since prime Big Ben Roethlisberger. So I thought Aaron Rodgers did a really good job, and he has been doing a really good job these last 2 weeks. And if this is the Aaron Rodgers that we get the rest of the way, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers can beat anybody in football. I truly do believe that. Somebody that's throwing accurately, is taking what the defense is giving them, is capable of throwing the ball downfield with accuracy, all those different things. And the fact that Rodgers is a quarterback that's capable of doing this in the cold gives the Steelers another advantage in cold weather games, like in Pittsburgh. And by the way, if the Steelers win the division this year and they get a playoff game at Acrisure Stadium, it's probably going to be a cold weather football game. So to have a guy like Aaron Rodgers who has a number of years, playing in cold weather, loves playing in cold weather, and has really big hands to be able to grip and throw that football with accuracy and velocity, even when the temperatures dip below freezing. It's a big advantage that the Pittsburgh Steelers have if and when they can make the NFL postseason this year. This is what Rodgers had to say in his postgame press conference yesterday about playing in the cold. He says, "I'm a California kid, but I always enjoy playing in cold weather. Feel like there could be some advantages to the offense, especially when you're playing on a field that's a little beat up or super slick like Green Bay became over the years. So I've always enjoyed playing in the cold. I'm gifted with hands that can handle a cold ball and a ball that's a little slick when the weather gets cold. So I've always been able to throw pretty good in the elements. So it's very good that the Pittsburgh Steelers have a guy like Rodgers that can play at the caliber that he's been playing over the last 2 weeks when the weather gets colder at the end of the year. Another offensive takeaway that I have here from this week's game, guys, is that it was back to methodical football for this football team. I mean, during the Baltimore Ravens game 2 weeks ago, it was a lot of downfield shots, right? It was a lot of lasers down the field, one-on-one opportunities to DK Metcalf. This week, Miami played a lot more what Aaron Rodgers refers to as shell coverage, which is 2 high safeties with corners playing back and playing a lot of cover 2, all these different things, and taking away the deep ball down the field. And we've seen what Rodgers' answer is to that throughout the season. It's to dump it off to Kenny Gainwell or to Jaylen Warren or to Darnell Washington, one of the number of yak threats that the Steelers have as dump-off options, and take what the defense is given. And this is what Rodgers said in his post-game press conference and how Miami was playing the Steelers offense last night. They were playing a bunch of shell coverage. Expected them to play maybe a little bit more one high. Now, last week, Baltimore played a lot of one high, and we hit some shots down the field, so I expected them to play some more shell, but it was a lot of shell. So we had to be efficient, dink and dunk at times, and kind of take what was there. And once we started to run the ball, everything started to open up. And right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers have proven over these last 2 weeks that, defenses are going to have to pick their poison against the Steelers passing attack. If you're going to play shell coverage and take away the deep ball like the Miami Dolphins did for the most part last night, they're just going to dink and dunk it to, the great yak threats that exist in the Steelers offense. Jaylen Warren, Kenny Gainwell, of course, Darnell Washington. No one wants to, pick him up after a dump off, right? But if you play like the Ravens and you play a lot of one high and you play super aggressively, yeah, we're not afraid to throw the ball down the field to DK Metcalf down the sideline, or Calvin Austin III, or Marquez Valdes-Scantling, any of these guys that can get open down the field with their speed. We're going to take shots down the field if you play aggressively, and if you play shell and you force us to, play underneath and dink and dunk and play methodically, we're perfectly fine doing that as well. So the Steelers have proven they can play both brands of football over the last 2 weeks, which shows the versatility that the Steelers passing attack has developed here over these last couple of games. Then we get to a major personnel changeup that Arthur Smith has deployed here in Pittsburgh this week, which is that throughout the season, this has been a heavy personnel team. 12 and 13 personnel. They've led the league in 12 and 13 personnel usage all season long. This week, they actually played a lot of 11 personnel. Now, they still threw in 12 and 13 personnel, especially when they were in their jumbo personnel packages. But they ran a lot of 11 in this game. About 60% of their plays were in 11 personnel. That's the highest it's been all season long. And they're really giving a lot of snaps to Marquez Valdes-Scantling now. You guys can take a look at the wide receiver snap share from last night for the Pittsburgh Steelers, where, of course, DK Metcalf getting the most snaps, as he usually does, among pass catchers in this offense. But then Adam Thielen and MVS both had over 34 snaps in this game. And that was more than any of the tight ends for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game. This is the first time this season where the number 2 and number 3 receivers in terms of total snaps outsnapped the number 2 tight end for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Usually that's Jonnu Smith, but you guys can take a look at the tight end snap share. Darnell Washington was on the field the most with 48 snaps. I think that makes a lot of sense because Darnell, as we're going to talk about here, is such an X factor in the cold. But then Pat Freiermuth ascended to the number 2 spot this week at 28 snaps. Spencer Anderson had 22 snaps. Now, he got a couple more because he had to go in and play guard after Isaac Seumalo went down with his injury. But then Jonnu Smith was actually downgraded to the number 4 tight end this week in terms of total snap share. So you can see Adam Thielen, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, these two guys have kind of changed the way that the Steelers kind of approach their offensive philosophy, and they're going more spread. They're going more receivers on the field. I think that's a good thing, and we've seen the success of this offense over the last 2 weeks since they've made that change. But, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, guys, I thought his impact was felt. Now, he only had 1 catch, and it did go for 19 yards and a touchdown, so if you're going to have 1 catch, it was nice to have to make the most of it. But he also made an impact in terms of some of the little details in his route running. Like, for example, on that 4th down and 3, you guys remember that little, flat route to Kenny Gainwell on the first 4th and 3 of the game, and they convert that and they keep the drive alive? Well, they're actually playing cover 2 on that play, and cover 2 is usually a coverage that can beat that type of rub concept that the Steelers were running. But because MVS ran his route to the outside shoulder of the outside cornerback for Miami, it stopped his momentum just enough, and it got Kenny Gainwell that much more space to be able to pick up the first down yardage. So it's that, kind of veteran savvy and nuance to the route running, to what their responsibilities are out on the field that I thought has led to more success for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the passing attack. Even though Adam Thielen and MVS aren't racking up the targets and catch numbers, they are making an impact out there because of their veteran savviness. Also, something that I was very happy to see, even though we didn't see any of these plays go for big gains like we saw in week 1, when we saw Calvin Austin III use some C-gap inserts, in week 1 where he scored a touchdown on one, and then there was another one where Ben Skoranek scored a touchdown on a C-gap insert. But this week we saw Adam Thielen be the C-gap insert guy. We haven't really seen Arthur Smith go back to those C-gap inserts since week 1, and I've been asking for him to go back to those, and it was nice to see a couple of those plays this week, even if Thielen didn't get either of the targets on those particular plays. I hope Art continues to put those in the playbook, because I think you're seeing this a lot with like Shane Steichen in the Colts, and how creative he's being with these kinds of things. I really think that that's kind of the new way wave in offensive play calling, and I hope that Arthur Smith can continue to call these types of concepts. But then we moved to the tight end room here, and I thought Darnell Washington was an absolute beast, of course. He only had a couple of catches, but he really made himself known out there running over some Dolphins players when he got a couple checkdowns. And he is a cold weather weapon, man, because, on just a regular night, like a 60 or 70 degree night, nobody wants to tackle Darnell Washington for obvious reasons. He's massive. But when the temperature gets below freezing, you really don't want to collide with the pads and the helmet of Darnell Washington. He is so strong, so big. And I pity any team that has to go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers and have to go up against this guy every single snap. So when you play Cleveland in a couple weeks, in Cleveland, where it's going to be cold, the Steelers are going to have an advantage. When they play Baltimore in Week 18, if Darnell's out there, and I'm guessing he will be, they're going to have an advantage there. If they have a home playoff game in a cold weather city like Pittsburgh here, right? Like, they're going to have that advantage. And then if they have to travel anywhere like New England or any of these other cold weather type of places, Denver, Darnell is going to be able to give them an advantage in those games. And, it's definitely a blessing to have a guy that with this skill set on your football team. But now sticking with the tight end position here, Jonnu Smith had a little bit of a new role in the Steelers offense this week. He was a running back, and he only had one rep at running back. It was a toss play to the right, and he scored a touchdown on it. But what I really like here is that it seems like Arthur Smith is finally waking up when it comes to Jonnu Smith, all right? They used to give him like 35 snaps a game on average through the first 11 games of the year. Over the last 3 games, he's only averaging 23, and then this week he had his lowest snap total of the year outside of the Dublin game versus Minnesota with just 19. So, but then when they did use Jonnu, I want to make this point here as well. When they did use him, I actually like what they did. They got him the ball on screens, and he ran over a Miami Dolphin on a screen earlier in the game, and then they used him at running back, and I actually kind of like him as like a 4-minute drill type of bigger running back option for them. And he had some wheels there. He got that head of steam, and it was beautifully blocked on the perimeter by the Steelers and their tight ends, and he was able to run that thing in and make it a 28-3 ball game early in the fourth quarter, pretty much ending the Miami's chances of winning that ball game. So, it wasn't as much, playing time for Jonnu Smith, but I'd like to see Jonnu at running back maybe a little bit more often and see if he can be a reliable third option as maybe like a power type of running back, because, he's not really good at running routes. He's not particularly great in terms of his hands, at least in terms of being a tight end. I'd like to see him play a little bit more running back and maybe some fullback and kind of get creative in the way you use Jonnu Smith, but I'm certainly going to sign off on him getting less than 20 snaps every day of the week. But then we get to the offensive line, and you guys have really heard me, praise this offensive line over the last few weeks. I'm going to continue to do so today. I just feel like this offensive line is just gelled absolutely beautifully. They're run blocking really, really well. Pass protection was once again pretty darn good last night for Rodgers. And, shout out to Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach, all right? Like, a lot of people, including myself, have called for this guy's job multiple times, and a lot of people did not agree with Mike Tomlin bringing him back this offseason, again, including myself. But, he's really done a good job developing this group. Fautano looks great. McCormick looks great. Frazier looks great. Sayamalu's playing good football when he's healthy, right? So they're getting the most out of their left tackles this year as well. This is one of the better units on this football team right now, and the future's bright in the trenches on the offensive side of the ball for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then we get to Kenny Gainwell, and I don't think he's going anywhere, guys. I think that the Steelers are going to give him a nice little contract. Now, if he's asking for legit number 1 running back money next year, I don't think Pittsburgh will go that far, but I don't think Kenny's going to ask for that. I think he's going to ask for maybe definitely a pay raise, and I think he's earned that. But yesterday he led the team in touches. He led the team in total yardage. In terms of his yards per touch, it was over 6 yards, which is an incredible number there. He didn't get into the end zone this time, but he's gotten a ton of touchdowns throughout the year. And, Aaron Rodgers is one of Kenny Gainwell's biggest fans, and this is what he had to say post-game about how much he loves playing with Kenny G. He says, "I love playing with Kenny. I really do. I mean, he is as smart as they come. He is super smart, and I still cannot believe what we got him for, contract-wise. I can't say enough good things about Kenny. Every single game, it seems like he comes up with impactful plays and makes guys miss and catches the ball. So certainly, I think if Rodgers comes back, he's going to definitely advocate for Kenny Gainwell to come back. And even with Caleb Johnson waiting in the wings, if the Steelers can bring back Kenny Gainwell here, I think they're probably going to do so, especially because of the value he brings to the special teams area of this football team as well. But then the final offensive takeaway I want to talk about here in this video is that Dylan Cook, the backup left tackle here, started the season as practice squad guy, was fantastic. And honestly, on film, I think it was probably the best pass protecting film we've seen from a left tackle on the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. Now, Broderick has played okay this year, and Andrus Peat was holding up okay when Broderick went down, but this week, the Steelers, I thought, gave less help in pass protection to the left tackle than they usually do, and Dylan Cook held up all night long. Now, maybe the Dolphins are just soft and, they couldn't get after the quarterback and they were stiff or whatever. And, maybe this week in, Ford Field in a dome stadium, he gets exposed. But really, man, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers have to really think for sure of giving Dylan Cook another start this week, even if Andrus Peat clears concussion protocol, because the film was really, really excellent from Dylan Cook this week. And he actually had a really good training camp as well. So if he keeps it up and he keeps it up for the rest of the season, and let's say, he's the left tackle for the rest of the year and he plays at a high level, I think he's going to get another contract here in Pittsburgh and kind of a prove-it one-year deal, and he's going to, battle it out with Broderick Jones for the future of that position here in Pittsburgh next year. Like Broderick, obviously first-round pedigree, spent a first-round pick on him. You're not going to completely give up on him heading into next year, but if Dylan Cook, plays the best left tackle out of anybody on the team this year, you think about bringing him back to, see if he can be the better option for this team moving forward and have him and Broderick battle it out in Latrobe for the starting position next year. So let me know who you guys think is going to be the starting left tackle here in Pittsburgh in 2026. Do you still think it's going to be Broderick Jones? I still think he's probably the favorite, type BJ. Do you think Dylan Cook comes in and earns the job not only this year but next, type DC? And then if you think it's somebody else, if you think they draft somebody, if they get a free agent, somebody else, Andrus Peat even, type SE down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks before we get into our defensive film takeaways here. But while I talk about Prize Picks today, let me know who you think is going to be the starting left tackle for the Steelers next season. With that, let's have word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And it is officially the holiday season, guys. And in my opinion, there's no better time to be a sports fan. Bowl games, basketball matchups, playoff pushes, it's all happening all at once. And while all that action is going on, there is one place where it feels so good to be right, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. My favorite feature about Prize Picks is that how you play is up to you. If you want a little bit more flexibility, you want to just have fun while you watch the game, you can choose the flex play where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you're feeling particularly strong about a lineup and want a bigger payout for winning, you can go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test and make some money. That is, if you know ball. For this Monday Night Football matchup this week, not Monday Night Football matchup, just regular matchup this week against the Detroit Lions. I'm taking the more on passing yards for Aaron Rodgers, the more on Amon-Ra St. Brown receiving yards, and the more on receptions for Jahmyr Gibbs. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on the Prize Picks app today. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Then we shift over to the defensive side of the ball here, and something that surprised me, especially with the Steelers being able to hold Devon Achane as well as they did it in this football game, less than 70 yards rushing, is that they played a lot of too high. They really lived in too high coverages in this game, and I thought they were going to load the box. They're going to put that safety in the box and, load up on the big linebackers and all that stuff and just force Miami to throw the ball. And, when I turned on the film today, it was a lot of, too high pre-snap looks. And I think when the Steelers have played their best football this year, it has come from that too high alignment. They played mostly too high against the Colts, and they held Jonathan Taylor, who was in the MVP discussion at that point, to less than 50 yards. And now in this game, another game that nobody is expecting the Steelers to be able to stop the run against Miami, they hold Devon Achane to less than 70 rushing yards. So I thought it was a really good game plan in that regard. I think that this is a too high football team. I think when you have guys like Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar who are as good of tacklers and as good of run defenders as they are, you can afford to play more too high. And I think that keeps the coverage that the Steelers are running on the back end a little bit more ambiguous, forces quarterbacks to hold it a little bit longer, and they certainly made Tua hold on to it a little bit longer than he's used to last night. But despite doing a good job with those too high safety coverages and getting into those too high looks to take away the pass, they were also really stout against the run, both up front and then at the second level, at the linebacker level. I thought for the most part, there were some lapses, especially in the first half, but, for the most part, they were really good and they made plays and, they were able to, win the line of scrimmage, I thought, throughout the night against a team in the Miami Dolphins that was putting up over 100 rush yards a game regularly for a month straight. Nobody really thought the Steelers were going to be able to stop them, but they did. And, one of the things that surprised me in this game from the defensive side of the ball when I went over the snap counts here is that Peyton Wilson really kind of barely played in this game. They really focused on putting their run-stuffing linebackers out there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And without Peyton Wilson on the field, they had better run defense, all right? And I don't know if that's necessarily a coincidence. He got 50 snaps from Patrick Queen, and I actually thought a big part of the reason why the Steelers' run defense was better this week was Patrick played one of his better games in run defense of his Steelers' career, in my opinion. I think he had double-digit tackles in this game. Cole Holcomb, though, he was kind of in those snaps where they could pass, but they could run it as well. He was kind of their in-between player. 31 snaps, he played pretty well. Malik Harrison was their true thumper in this game, 29 snaps. Thought he had a good game. Then Peyton Wilson, just 21 snaps, and most of those came on, pass-heavy situations, third and long, and then he played quite a bit at the end during garbage time. So, Peyton Wilson was not as big of a factor in the game plan this week, and neither was Brandon Echols, the slot corner, because the Steelers really lived in base personnel, which means just two corners on the field without a nickel defender. So, definitely a different kind of setup than we've seen from the Steelers in weeks past, but it definitely worked. And I do want to give a shout-out here to Malik Harrison, who, he's not a good pass defender. All right, I want to make that abundantly clear. There were certainly some moments of where he was lost in pass coverage, but what else do you expect from this guy, man? Like, this guy is a true thumper, and, we loved Landon Roberts here in Pittsburgh for many years, and Landon Roberts was the worst pass coverage linebacker in the league, all right? But, when you face a team like Miami that wants to establish the run, having a guy like Malik Harrison, who is a true thumper, can get off blocks, is a really good tackler, super strong at the point of attack. There was multiple plays in this game where, the Steelers don't get the run stuff unless Malik Harrison is on the field. There was one play where Miami had the Steelers outflanked on a perimeter run on the outside to the right, and they pulled their tackle and their guard to the right side, and they were completely dead to rights. It could have been like a 30 or 40-yard run for Devon Achane, but Malik Harrison just gets off his block immediately, gets into the backfield, and it's like a 2 or 3 yard gain. That was a huge tackle in that ball game for Malik Harrison. It completely goes unnoticed. I haven't really heard his name being thrown out there all that much on Steelers Twitter, and I just want to give this guy his credit because even though he's not good in pass coverage, and that's not what he does, he's a hell of a run defender, and he deserves his credit for that. But I thought overall, the tackling overall for the Steelers was good in this game. When the Steelers' defense has been bad, it's been because the tackling hasn't been good. And this week, I thought everybody was tackling well. The defensive linemen, the linebackers, and the players in the secondary all contributed. And there was very few missed tackles throughout the evening, which contributed to keeping everything in front of you, getting Miami into a lot of third down situations where they were able to, get them off the field. In terms of pass coverage, it was more zone than man. They ran some quarters, they ran some cover two, they buzzed down into some cover three looks from too high. It was from mostly too high in this football game. The only time they really played in one high was when it was in an obvious short yardage run situation. But other than that, they were really playing a lot of too high coverages, and pre-snap looks. And in this game, it was a lot of zone. And I think that this Steelers team is built to have their eyes on the quarterback and play instinctively. I think that this has been something that's been a big philosophical change for this defense. They played a lot of man at the beginning of the season, and as the year has gone on, they've played a lot more zone. And I think that this team is definitely built to play that brand of football as opposed to 1-versus-1 true man coverage. But then you have to give credit to the defensive coordinator, Teryl Austin. Now, he still has work to do, in my opinion, if you're going to get my endorsement to bring him back. All right, it's just been too inconsistent this year. But, I thought this performance was a good one from him. He had some really good play calls. He didn't set up his guys up for failure as often as he has in previous weeks from a formation and alignment standpoint. And I thought he had some really interesting third down calls in this game, including some simulated pressures that were really, really nice. There was a play, the Jalen Ramsey sack. He brought him down from the heavens. That was a true pressure, but it was a kind of exotic zone pressure. And then what they would do is they would line up like Patrick Queen at the line of scrimmage, bring him out into coverage, and then bring a different linebacker on a blitz. And they just made it tough for Tua to identify who was coming, who was going out into coverage, all that different stuff. And I thought, Teryl Austin had a good defensive game plan in this one. And you guys saw the result, especially there in the second half on Monday. Then, some player profiles here that I want to talk about. Yahya Black, in my opinion, is still playing a bit too high. His pad level is still very inconsistent. And when you are a big guy that plays with high pads, it can be very easy to push you backwards. And we saw a couple more examples of that this week. You still see the high-end flashes from this guy, but he still has a little bit of a ways to go. And I just wanted to point that out. But another defensive tackle here, a young guy that's made an impact here with Derek Harmon and Daniel Akwale out of the lineup, is Zesi Otomiwu here. Otto is what they call him in the building. He's really making an impact, man. And, he's not like the best player in the world, but in terms of like a rotational defensive lineman, he is more than serviceable. There's a couple really nice plays where he held the line of scrimmage on a one-on-one at the line of scrimmage in this game, and he got a sack, and, he's just flashing, man. He had on the play where Alex Highsmith sacked Lamar Jackson to finish the game 2 weeks ago, he had an incredible stunt where he blew up a Ravens offensive lineman. Like, this guy plays with a lot of juice, a lot of energy, and he's an okay run defender as well. So, I'll take that from somebody that was as far down the Steelers depth chart as he was at the beginning of when he first started here. So, certainly proud of Otto, and, I think Cam Hayward gave him a shout-out after the game as well. So, looking forward to seeing what that young man, number 93, is going to be able to do in the weeks to come. And now you add Derek Harmon back into the mix this week. So if the run defense is looking this much better this week, and you're adding Derek Harmon, who's been a big stabilizing force for this defense when he's been in the lineup, I think that this run defense is setting itself up to stabilize. And with the way that the pass coverage is looking, whether it's Asante Samuel Jr., James Pierre, Brandon Echols, Joey Porter Jr., and then, of course, the two safeties, I really like the way that this Steelers defense is shaping up. And I think they're shaping up here to play their best football of the season at the end of the year, the exact opposite to what we saw last year from the Steelers defense, which is exactly where we wanted to be when we were talking about this team before the season began. So sound off for me down there in the comment section. Is the Steelers defense back? Give me a yes or no down there in the comment section. I think there's a case to be made for yes, but they certainly have a big test as they go up against the number one scoring offense in the NFL this week in the Detroit Lions. All right, that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. We're going to have our weekly preview, our in-depth preview for this week's matchup against the Detroit Lions on the channel tomorrow. Will be our first video of the day. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support. And again, go follow me on X if you haven't already for our film analysis. If you want the film examples of everything that we talked about today, it's all up there on my X account. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till tomorrow, guys. Here we go, Steelers.